All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is now 6:34 and a quorum of members is present, so the meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Oops, sorry, I've got to turn that. There we go. Okay, Ms. Crosby.
Yeah.
Mr. Helmer.
Here.
Mr. Kurth.
Yes.
Ms. Manley. Was that a yes, Susan? Ms. Manley. Ms. Schulz.
Here.
Ms. Unger.
Here.
Ms. Rundercheck.
Here.
Okay.
All right, so fellow board members, as you make motions again tonight and second motions, please lead with your name so that we know who's making the motion. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn into closed session.
Jeffrey Kurth, move to recess into closed session pursuant to section 19.851C E and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider hold on, what am I considering? Approve closed session minutes, the employment performance compensation matters pertaining to staff and negotiation strategies.
Can I have a second?
Mitch Helmer.
Janet, second.
We have a motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Ms. Schultz. Please call the roll.
Mr. Kurth.
Yes.
Ms. Schulz.
Yes.
Ms. Crosby.
Yes.
Mr. Helmer.
Yes.
Ms. Unger.
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
We are moving into closed session and will return to open session around 7 p.m. live again?
There is a delay, so, oh, there we go.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 7:28 and we are returning from closed session into open session. In recognition of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by posting the agenda at each district school, the district office, and the city library. The agenda was also posted on the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Journal-Sentinel, the Waukesha Freeman, and the Waukesha Now, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. The next item on our agenda is privilege of the floor. Do we have any email requests?
We did not receive any.
Okay. We'll move on to, I do not have a message, so superintendent update.
I have no general updates at this time.
All right, we'll move to the consent agenda. Are there any items that should be pulled out for separate consideration? Do I have a motion?
Jeffrey Kurth, so moved.
Second. Susan.
I have a motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Ms. Manley. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby.
Yes. Moving on to our regular agenda, item A is to discuss and approve the LED project in the food prep area.
Yeah, so what we have is a follow-up to discussions that were had at a board meeting that was actually held at Elmwood Elementary. We certainly have had some updates since then. And we are looking and recommending approval of the LED projects for both food prep areas and cafeterias in all of the schools. We have provided some detail here. And in fact, Diana, do I have the presentation up?
Yes, you do.
Okay, so if we could go to the second slide, please, Dan.
Yep, we're there.
Okay. So what this does is it kind of gives a general breakdown of the estimated cost based on information we received from a vendor, the chosen vendor that we'd like to move forward with. We do believe that one of the biggest changes that was found is that given this again the new time that we found for our staff to be able to move forward with some work. At first, we were somewhat uncertain of when and how we could do this work with all the other items that we had. Because we do have extra time, we would recommend doing this work internally. And I guess I'll defer to Mitch at some point here as your facilities committee chair to wrap up the conversation. But there is a value to it with not necessarily any true incurred costs. We do believe that as a result of this, the total project cost without the labor is about $44,000. We are anticipating some energy savings of about a quarter of that. The estimated ROI that we have provided is a conservative estimate. We actually, while it's conservative at 3.8 years, which is a really good return on investment, we actually believe it could be even better than that once we complete the project. And I do want to clarify that the majority of the dollars being utilized for this are coming out of Fund 50. Fund 50 is our food service fund, and that is outside of our general fund. While there is an impact to the general fund, and given the return, we do believe that certainly we should move forward with this project. I do want to point out some things on the right side of that slide, and it's based off of food service using the cafeterias for 40% of the day. I did mention about the conservative estimate. Part of the reason why we're able to charge more and utilize more for Fund 10 versus Fund 50 is that we do have the food prep areas metered, and all the energy is paid for from Fund 50. And right now, as a result of that, we don't have a separate meter in the cafeteria, and so therefore, and then we also, if we were to, we could also do a study that gets quite complicated, but it would take some time. And that's certainly something we are currently working on and looking into. But the energy from the cafeterias are not paid for from Fund 50. As a result of that, if I can move to the next slide, please. Diana, are we there?
Not yet. Dan has a delay. Dan, can you go to the next slide? There you go.
And so in talking to Mitch and Patrick and Amy, and then getting some feedback from some of the other committee members, there are other benefits besides just the true return on investment. They're highlighted here. You know, there's safety pieces. Obviously, as we mentioned, you know, some of the other pieces, you know, the fact that we don't have students or non-custodial staff in the building makes it, you know, certainly a much safer environment to do this. Labor savings, material savings, and sustainability. And so, you know, with that, you know, I guess I'll hand it over to Mitch to provide further details as he sees appropriate. And again, administration recommends we move forward with this proposal as presented. Mitch?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, we've gone through quite a bit of detail on this, and I'll reiterate, I agree with most of what Joe says. I think this is a very conservative estimate. Looking at the energy savings from the report that we had, it had some of the cafeterias on much lower hour counts than what I think they're actually used. So I think the energy savings has a large opportunity to increase in that 11. I think it's probably going to be higher than that. And then the other piece that a lot of companies will kind of put in here is the maintenance savings from having to replace these lights and bulbs anyways. And we didn't include that. It's really hard to put a number on that, but I think that is a pretty significant number because all of these bulbs are 5 to 7 years old or 8 years old, and a lot of those are going to start going bad in the next couple of years. So we'd have to replace fixtures and bulbs anyway. So getting this all done with no students in the building with a much more efficient technology will give our buildings a lot more life, and I just think it's a really good opportunity for us to take advantage of this time to be able to do something like this. And I would also like to reiterate, Joe, you touched on the 40% paying for the lighting for 40% of the food service budget. In order to get to that, we need to do that energy study or get a separate meter. I'd like to have you guys get estimates on both of those. My assumption is it'll make more sense to get a meter in the 2 high schools and then maybe do the studies in the smaller schools. I don't know what those costs look like, but I think that's another big piece for us to help allocate those costs so that we can spend more money on our general budget on the educating of kids instead of not paying out of the food budget. So let me know what you come back with on that when you guys start looking at numbers, and we can approach that and figure out what the best way to achieve that. My concern is paying for that energy study. I don't know how long that's good for. And if we do that today, then we have to redo it in 5 years, or if we change light bulbs, I just don't know what that looks like. Whereas the energy meter, once that's installed, it's a pretty objective number that's coming out of there, and there's really not much arguing with it. It's just that then it becomes a calculation of how much time it's used for.
Yeah, agreed. And then the other point of clarification with that study is that the study could be paid for through Fund 50 if we followed a specific process that's been determined by DPI. So again, we wouldn't be just doing a study and having that, those dollars taken out of Fund 10 or the general fund. We would try and maximize the dollars from Fund 50, and then certainly are looking at the alternative of just having separate meters, as Mitch mentioned.
Joe, can you explain the without labor portion of this? So it looks like the original estimate and what we had gotten via email last week was $17,000 for the labor if we used our employees, and now we're saying none. Is that because they're not doing their regular work during the day, and so they're going to do this within normal hours, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. We already have them working. It's now just a matter of prioritizing certain projects. And so there will not be, like at the last time, there was a possibility of overtime, extra time, or we do have part-time people that we would have, again, sunken more costs into. But right now, because we have them working already, it's not like extra dollars within our budget. And I guess I'd like to hand it over, back to Mitch, as he can kind of talk about the value piece versus actual, out-of-pocket dollars to kind of clarify this further.
Yeah, so my understanding was we're paying that staff today, and I don't know if they've got a full work. I mean, right now they're doing a lot of other value add stuff of deferred maintenance, but eventually that workload is going to diminish, and we're going to be paying that maintenance staff regardless. So from my conversation with Joe, it's better to find them work to do, and this would fit in that area. And the good thing about this is if they do this now, or they'd have to do this in the next 2 or 3 years as these lights continue to fail, but if they do it now, they won't have to. So now we're using that labor that we already have to pay for, as opposed to taking them off jobs in the future in the next 2 to 3 years to patch work and replace these light bulbs.
Is there money in the budget for, in the facility budget to do this, or is this extra beyond the budget?
We do have dollars in the budget, and obviously some of these dollars have been, we do have some general savings. We had a milder winter. But we do have dollars for projects such as this. And again, because of the opportunity that we have before us, the fact that the majority of the dollars are coming from Fund 50 to do this, and again, the opportunity with the timing of it all, I do want to just reemphasize that these are conservative estimates, as far as the return on investment, and and the rebates and such. And so we just, again, just think it's a good opportunity for us at this time.
And then one more question, the energy savings that we should potentially be seeing will kind of, I don't know, we're going to be able to earmark it or, somehow be able to say this is the savings. Will that just flow right back into the facility budget? Or is there a way to say, like, here's our savings, we can put that aside somehow? I don't know if there's any way to do that.
For something this small, we probably, I'm not trying to minimize the project, but for something of this caliber, I mean, it's almost like a very easy in and out that it's just gets absorbed in the general fund.
Amy, I think that's a good point, though. This is kind of phase one is what I hope to see, and then next we can look at outside lighting or hallways or the next high use big value item. And I think as we start, based on these numbers, it's going to take us 3 years to pay this off anyways, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So after the 3 years, then I definitely think we should start looking at putting this money back into the facilities budget or however else we can do that once we start looking at a number closer to 100,000 as opposed to 10,000.
Right. I just want to make sure that as we're doing these projects that have a potential for savings, that we're not just, using that up right away. We're actually, being mindful and using that savings for, areas that we need, whether it be long-term maintenance or, somewhere where we might not have the funding right now, but in 3 years when this is paid off, we have another 11,000 that could potentially go to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a larger budget question. We should definitely have that this year of what are we doing? Like we talked some about the busing savings we had. I think it was like $70,000. We need to start trying to capture some of that and say, this wasn't money we were spending, or this is money we were spending last year and we're not this year. How can we try to allocate this to something that we all agree on that we need to start making a priority?
Right.
Right. And related to that, what kind of reporting are we going to do on this over the next 3 years or whatever to see whether this estimated ROI is in fact true?
I wouldn't recommend doing a whole lot of trying to capture that because I think that you're going to spend more money trying to capture that. I think you're going to spend $10,000 trying to capture that savings. I mean, it's.
Well, I'm talking maybe just like comparing energy bills year over year, that sort of thing.
And I had a conversation with Joe about this. The tough thing with that is, like, this year is a complete anomaly compared to next year. So you have all the schools shut down for 3 months of this year. So it's really challenging to do. I mean, the easiest thing to do is look at the kilowatt hours consumed by the current technology and look at the new kilowatt hours consumed by the new technology and look at our rate. I mean, the numbers pretty much speak for themselves now. I don't know that there's a whole lot we need to do after the fact to verify it.
This is
But if
Kristen.
if you have suggestions, we can certainly work with Joe and Patrick or Andy to see if we can capture that. I don't want to burden them to try to capture something that we know is pretty accurate.
Yeah, we would agree with Mitch.
But it sounds like you can measure the usage, right, Mitch? So that would be on the bills that we get, and that shouldn't be too difficult to capture, right?
Well, you're talking the electricity is on. You're talking the electricity for the entire building. So if
Right.
say we start using more efficient refrigerators in the food prep area, that would then be a mix. You would be able to compare apples to apples with this same project going on too. Or if the lunch prep area isn't using mixers and the ovens, and I don't know if the ovens are electric, but if they're not using that for 3 months this year, then you lose all of. There's just not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah, but you don't do an energy savings comparison for an entire year. You would look month over month. So we could pick months in which the building was open. So, I mean, I agree. I don't want to spend a ton of time on it, but I would like to see some proof that this actually did come to fruition, especially if this is supposed to be a pilot for a potentially larger project.
I agree with that. This is Kristen.
And I think you could probably do that this is just, based on, especially because we have a separate meter for the food prep. Look what our January usage was and then compare it to next January or something to that effect. And I think there's ways to look at it, like, again, especially in the food prep area. But as Mitch said, there's other things that use the electricity in food prep, not just the lights. But I mean, I think there's a way that we could potentially or do an average over a couple of months. But it's going to have to be the same month each because of, kind of just using the same, the material in the same way. So maybe we do December, January of this year versus December, January of next year, something like that.
But on that note, if you're talking in a summer month, you're taking air conditioning loads in. So
right, that's why I'm saying to do. That's why I'm saying to do like. Yeah,
if you look
December,
at
January.
it's the same.
Yeah.
The rest of their energy consumption should be the same, essentially, roughly the same.
Roughly the same. Yeah.
If we take Eisenhower, you're talking about a $60,000 energy bill, probably. I'm just kind of assuming.
I'm just saying for the food prep. I'm just saying food prep at that point. Just because we have a separate meter there. I think it's a lot easier if we just look at food prep and say, here on this meter, in January of 2020, it was this kilowatt. January of 2021 was this. Just just to compare. I mean, there's going to be, yeah, like you said, we could have the new dishwashers might take effect. There could be some differences, but it might just be helpful just to kind of just to see. But that, I mean, I think with anything that we do, we want to make sure that there's some level that we circle back. I mean, same thing we were talking about with open enrollment, like, you know, circling back each time we make a decision, circling back to make sure that what the decision we made was
Actually, I think
the benefits that we were seeing.
if we want to take an easier route, I think we can probably talk to Andy and have him pull an energy meter. And he did this when they did a couple lights. He can put an energy meter on a current fixture and see what the draw is on that current fixture, and then put one on a new one. And then we have to do then is just extrapolate it out by how many lights are in that cafeteria. That's the easiest, quickest way to do it without having to bring in all the other noise.
Okay. Yep. Just some way to close that loop, I think, is important.
Yeah, no, I agree. Joe, can you talk with Andy and see if he started doing some of that, and I don't know if he did it in cafeterias or if it was just in the classroom, but to see if he can put something together quick on that. That shouldn't be too bad.
And it doesn't have to be right away. This would be like after this is approved and the LEDs are running, just so that we can just see the before and after.
Yeah, so based off of the conversation, I think what we'll do is we'll bring a follow-up to the board sometime in January or February of next year.
Yep, that would be good.
With that, we would recommend approval of the project as has been presented.
Do I have a motion so we can start discussion?
I'll make a motion to approve or to discuss the LED lighting proposal.
Yeah, let's say to approve it, and we're gonna.
Oh, sorry, to approve it.
This is Janet, second.
Motion by Mr. Helmer, second by Ms. Schultz to approve the LED project as presented. Any discussion?
Just a nice job to Mitch. I know it's been a passion project, so thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
No, I think this is Janet. I think this is a good idea. We should go with it, and I think it's pretty logical that we will end up saving money on it. Yes, we probably should try to get back and do some measurements to see if it really is successful. But Andy had taken myself and I believe it was Kate to one of the classrooms where they had replaced all the lights with LEDs in that room. I just want to mention that he pointed out that the teacher actually didn't even use all the lights in the room. So there's even more savings there because it could be that not all the lights will be turned on if it turns out that these lights are much brighter than our normal lights are.
That's a good point, Jan, and that's something we probably need to look at to review as well, how we can try to drive this. This is kind of the first phase of getting it all swapped out, and the second phase is kind of looking at how do we optimize some of those areas.
Any other discussion? I have a motion by Mr. Helmer, a second by Ms. Schultz. Diana, can you take the roll?
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck,
Yes.
Ms. Unger.
Yes.
Motion passes. That takes us on to the second item on our regular agenda to discuss, approve the Family First COVID-19 Response Act policies.
Yeah, so as has been past practice to bring policies to you for a first read followed by approval at the next meeting, the current policy does not necessarily require this. Therefore, in the present state of flux surrounding COVID-19, we are asking for approval of the Attached Families First COVID-19 Response Act policies as presented by legal counsel. Now, in talking to Janet, who is your Personnel Committee Chair, we kind of went back and forth on, why we could wait or why we should wait. While it's not, the law isn't necessarily going to be enforced for 30 days into today, unless that's changed, Janet, because that very well could have, like everything else, it seems. We would like approval sooner than later, and so we would recommend approving this today so that we can start doing all the legwork behind the scenes with our benefits and our benefits staff and HR staff. And again, what I'll do is I'll defer to Nicole right now, who is the Director of Employment Services, to just give high-level changes and adjustments or developments and why we have to get these policies in place. So, and then I guess at that point, once we have Nicole provide the very high-level, maybe like the quick and dirty 1-minute overview, Janet, you'd like to add anything, from the Personnel Committee Chair level, we'd appreciate that feedback. So go ahead, Nicole.
Sure. So you're probably very aware of these policies. They're enacted both private and public sector. The difference being is that there is no tax credits for us public sector folks. But by and large, what we're seeing is that there's a new, it extends FMLA for childcare reasons. So it follows our standard FMLA, but there is an extension should a parent need to take leave time to be able to care for their child in the event that daycare closes, in the event that schools have closed. So basically the situation that we're in now, they can take up to the 12 weeks of FMLA with those first 2 weeks, first 10 days are essentially unpaid unless the employee has paid leave. This also, just for this portion of the FMLA, employees who need this benefit, they only have to have worked for our district for 30 calendar days to be eligible. So it definitely changes the eligibility, but again, it's only extended for this part of the FMLA. And so if they've already used up some FMLA, it would reduce their FMLA leave by that amount of time if they've taken FMLA already this year. This particular policy as well, both policies that we're going through with the sick leave and the FMLA, they only extend through December 31st of 2020. So it's a policy that we're enacting, but essentially it will likely be done and over with come December. Skipping kind of down to if we go to the paid emergency paid sick leave policy, essentially that's giving about 2 weeks of paid sick leave to employees who are diagnosed with COVID-19. If they've been advised to self-quarantine related to COVID-19. So it goes into the payout for sick leave, and then the payout's not equal. So payout for a diagnosis is slightly different than what you would get if you had to care for someone who's been diagnosed, or because of childcare that you have to be home for that. So it's giving additional leave, paid leave, essentially, to employees. If you scroll down, I believe it's I'm not sure if you have, it's page 7 of 8 on the memo that was in policy that was sent to you. It kind of goes over the duration of the leave as well as the different circumstances that would qualify for that. So you said a minute, I know I went over a minute. But it's the same standard policy that's been sent out essentially by the DOL with some refinements by our legal counsel. So then this is consistent, Nicole, with what other school districts would be doing?
Yes, I mean, this is a federal policy, so this is essentially what anybody should be doing based on the directive that we've been given.
So I don't believe anybody would have a different policy. So this is just an addendum essentially to our current FMLA process.
This is Janet. I just want to mention that I oversee the paid leave policies for my employer. And this is what I've been personally working on myself. And I see nothing in these sick leave policies that differ from what I am doing, actually. So this is standard. It's the law. All employers have to follow it. And yeah, it's the same for the school. The only thing, like, a school will not get the full tax credits as a private employer does.
Right.
This is Kate. I have one question, Nicole. The sick leave policy and the FMLA both talk about leave for caring for your children who are out of school or daycare. What is the difference, and why is it in the sick leave policy as well?
Well, because it's a bit confusing. I mean, do you have the FMLA where they say the first 2 weeks they can't get paid, but then you have the paid sick leave that really comes in and swoops it up. So they technically can claim a portion of their sick leave. Now it's reduced, I believe, I'm looking through this, that they don't get paid the full amount of sick leave for those circumstances for childcare, closer to 2/3.
Okay, but did they choose to use their sick leave for that? Or would it also work if they had already used up all their FMLA and they wanted to
If they've already used FMLA, they can't qualify for FMLA, but they could take this leave time.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just wanted to mention, under the law, you can't force an employee to take this type of paid leave over their already accrued paid leave. The employee has the choice. So, for instance, if they're taking care of a child, they're only getting 2/3 pay under these new laws. They might choose to take their accrued paid leave instead.
Correct.
Because if that's covering 100%, that's their choice.
Do we need a motion for each one, or just, is there 3 or just 2 policies on here?
Well, these 2 policies are, they're technically 2 policies. One is the FMLA and one is the sick leave. There was a third policy, which is just, we didn't previously have. We had our FMLA information in the handbook, and after having our legal counsel review both our handbook language and then going through these policies, her suggestion was that we adopt a more formal FMLA policy. It's far more detailed than our handbook language is. And so that was a recommendation from legal, that we also have an additional FMLA policy that is outside of our handbook.
So then the first policy is just an addendum to the FMLA one.
Right.
Is that right?
I mean, it's a separate, it's a new policy from, and it expires. So the first one is, Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act policy, yes, addendum to our FMLA, and that will expire. And then,
but then the regular FMLA policy will not expire, because that's
correct.
That will move forward. Okay.
Correct.
So do I have a motion? And I'm not sure exactly. There's 3, it looks like it's 3 policies, but one's an addendum. So we want to call them out separately, or if we want to just say policies as presented.
I'll do policies as presented, Jeffrey. This is Jeffrey Kurth. I move to approve Families First COVID-19 Response Act policies as presented.
Second, Janet.
I have a motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Ms. Schultz. Any discussion?
Just a question on the overall FMLA policy. You said that is more detailed than what is in our handbook. Is it what we're currently doing today? It's just now spelled out in the policy format. There aren't any actual changes.
Correct. It is what we're doing today. What I appreciated about it is the level of detail that's in it compared to what's in the handbook, but it's very much in line with the FMLA policy or procedures that we've been doing. It just spells it out a lot better for our staff.
Yeah, I thought that it was a really well-written policy because it is so detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Do these policies have a, you said that they go into effect and then they are in effect until December 31st of 2020. As of right now, we know that always could change. Is there something written in here where it only goes into effect until then, or do we need to, oh, it does say, okay, at the very last, it does say, well,
Yeah, it's there.
Okay, so we don't have to do a motion in December to take it away. It will just expire.
Correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? So I have a motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Ms. Schultz. Diana, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
Motion passes. That brings us to item C, which is to discuss approve policy 6235 fund balance.
Yeah, so as a result of the work that's being done by the Finance Committee that's being chaired by Crislin, the committee is reviewing varying respective policies related to school finance. As you know, you previously received and approved a policy. This is the next one kind of in the foyer. You know, it's a first read. There are minor adjustments being suggested. But if you did have any comments, questions, or concerns, we'd ask you to either send them to me, Patrick, or Crislin, and we'd be happy to clarify. But I do know that this was put through as a result of the conversation held at the Facilities Committee.
Yeah, and Joe, this is Crislin. That's exactly right. We were just trying to go through all of our finance policies on the Finance Committee, and this was one of the first ones we looked at. And it just had a different reference to the sort of corporate structure that we use. We don't have a director of financial services, so we wanted to make that in line with what we actually have, which is our superintendent or his designee. So that was the major change in this policy. But otherwise, it's almost exactly a replication of what the Neola policy is. So I think we'd keep that in line with all standard practices in that fashion, but then use our own vernacular in our policy.
So does anybody want, do we want to just wait then and kind of have a second read, or first read now and then second read at our April 27th meeting? I think that's what will, that's typically our policy or our practice, and I think moving forward with that. So yeah, like Joe said, if there's any questions, refer them back to Crislin, Joe, or Patrick. Next item, item D, is action items from closed session, and we have 3. I'll start with Mr. Kurth.
Jeffrey Kurth, move to approve the employment, performance, and compensation matters pertaining to staff as presented.
Susan, second.
Motion by Mr. Kurth, and this is for the employee report as presented. Any discussion? Mr. Kurth and Ms. Manley. Diana, can you call the roll?
Sure. Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Motion passes. The second item from closed session, Ms. Unger, can you tee that one up?
Sure. Kate Unger, I move to approve the staff compensation model as presented. And then Joe, if you want to give a little explanation of what's included in that recommendation.
Yeah, so the rationale for bringing this to the board and seeking approval this early for the upcoming school year is that we are required to send out contracts or provide non-renewal notices to our employees by the end of the month. And as has been typical, we would usually send out the contracts the week before spring break or right around there, and then have our employees return them shortly after the spring break. Has been our standard practice. Now we understand that with the uncertainty of everything, you know, they have not changed the non-renewal dates as of now. So that's why we're asking for this approval now, so we can get those teacher contracts issued as soon as possible. What we have recommended to the board is a total compensation increase of 2.5%, which is what has been budgeted for next school year. What that 2.5% encompasses is a 1.67% increase for a general increase for all staff. What that will mean is about $1,000, or actually it will mean $1,000 increase for our certified staff, our teaching staff, and professional staff. We would then, you know, between the administrators and the classified staff, we would not necessarily give that specific increase, but we would work within the parameters of that amount that we have to work with for those two classifications. We then also have an amount set aside. So why the difference between the 1.67 and the full 2.5 is that the difference would be, we also have a strategic compensation model that the board's now adopted for the last 3 or 4 years. That's based on performance and merit. We do have about 50 eligible staff that are able to seek that compensation based on the model. Again, assuming that they provide their results in their portfolio with results and data to support it. That would be, again, you know, the next big chunk of the difference up to the 2.5. And then we also, based on presentations that we provided to the school board, we've also provided them to the Budget Balancing Task Force and others. We believe that we need an increase to the base levels of some of our staff, you know, based on our comparables and based on the data that we've brought forth. And that will allow us to do that, or at least continue to do that to a certain degree. That may not get us fully to where we want to be, but we did feel very strongly that we stay within the budget allocated dollars of 2.5%, and that we continue to work our way through that because we didn't get here into this situation overnight, and you know, we can't expect to fix it and get out of it. And we also just need to be fiscally responsible with the budget projections that we've made. So that is essentially what the motion and the second have been mentioned for.
All right, so I have a motion by Ms. Unger, a second by Mr. Kurth. So we'll continue with the discussion.
So I would like to see a higher percentage go to the variable piece to reward our high-performing certified staff, and less go to that base increase. So I'd like to see $750 go to each teacher, with the remainder going to the remainder of that, the extra $250 going to the performance piece.
This is Janet. I would agree with that. I really would like to see more going towards performance and merit, and more towards market-based. Like to see that the allocation be shifted there more.
This is Kate. I am happy with the proposal as it is. I think all of our staff are doing a tremendous job, especially during this difficult time. So I would like to see them all rewarded, and then I do appreciate, you know, some money being allocated to the market adjustments and merit increases as well. But I think that base pay to keep us competitive with the other districts around us is very important.
And this is Chrislyn. I would agree with that. I think that in these times when all staff have been called to do some tremendous things very quickly under a lot of pressure, I think that everybody is acting beyond what they ever expected having to do for our district. And there already are merit increases and merit pay allocated in this proposal by administration. I just don't think that it needs to be adjusted any further. I think with that, under these circumstances, we have to trust the administration to recommend what's best for our staff, and especially to retain our staff. When we did not give these people raises like the market should have required us to do so in previous years, we need to try to bring it up to a standard so that we don't lose them.
It's Janet. I don't necessarily think that by allocating more towards those variable factors necessarily take away from bringing the staff up to the markets. I think they can still be variable and at the same time meet those market levels of pay. I also think, you know, and teachers will still be rewarded under a more variable type of a pay structure. I am glad to see that we have moved more towards some more merit, some more performance-based pay. That's great. I think it is very good that that's been changing. But again, there are some teachers are deserving more maybe rewards than others. So to lump everybody all together, I don't think is a very wise way of doing compensation. So again, I think that we should allow more variables there.
Yeah, I want to echo what Jen just said there too. We're not asking for less money to be spent. We're asking for the exact same money to be spent. I just want to see that larger piece. And if administration comes back and says we're going to allocate it exactly the way we had originally had, then that's their decision, and I'm okay with that if that's how they feel. But I would like to, as elected by the taxpayers, I'd like to put more into that bucket and like to see that allocated to our higher performing teachers and make sure that we're retaining those and make sure that we're rewarding excellence in this district.
I would agree with that statement.
Yeah, this is Mrs. Crosby, or Ms. Crosby. I think that there's a lot, you know, since a lot that has been done in the last 4 or 5 years to really get us to a compensation model that is not just a flat rate increase, or, you know, so a lot's been done. This new way of displaying their portfolios and, you know, working that extra bit to get that compensation, extra compensation, is relatively new. I think it's only been maybe the last 4 or 5 years. So I want to continue down the path that we're on. This is what the teachers, that what we've told them how they're going to get paid. I think if, you know, in the future, if we want to look at different compensation models, that's something that we can potentially look at. But I think for this point, this is a lot better than we were probably 5 or 6 years ago, where it was just more spread out evenly. This is a way to give merit and also to for those higher in demand positions as well. There's a lot more flexibility than we ever had before. And so I agree with the administration and what they're doing. And I think that, like I said, if we're going to look at compensation model changing in the next 5, you know, changing, I think that's something we want to work with Nicole and the personnel committee and really look at that and as something that's evolving and not just make a decision right here on that.
Hi, this is Susan. I would just ask if Nicole could chime in. I know the recommendation came from the administration and she's extremely close to how that played out. If you can speak to the merit end of it.
Yes. I mean, I would still agree that I believe the 1,000 is necessary to help us continue to keep up as we've fallen pretty far behind based on our presentation that we gave. We do, sorry, baby in the background. You know, I think we have money in the budget. We, you know, within that 2.5%, we allocated that based on our portfolio and where we think that people are going to land with that process. We're very proud of that process. We have a great turnout for that process. And we do, and we will make, you know, those market adjustments and those merit adjustments with that. But again, in order to prevent our compensation from falling even further behind, I still think we need to consider these, you know, kind of cost of living adjustments that need to be made and our market adjustments. And if we go lower, I'm just worried it's just going to get worse. And then somewhere down the line, we're going to be paying a significantly higher amount to play catch up.
So when we looked at the data for teacher retention, I guess my biggest concern was we're not losing teachers from 1-year experience to 30-year experience. We're losing specific segments of that marketplace. And I don't remember exactly what it was, but I thought it was in like the 2 to 7 year experience range or 3 to 7. And my concern with this is if we just throw the same percentage across the board, we're not addressing that problem. And my biggest concern is we need to address the area of where we're losing teachers and fix that retention piece and not just throw money at a larger problem. So that's
but
my
this
big
budget does account for that and through the merit increases, and we're working towards that. So that's, we allocated for all of that in this proposal. And then, you know, last year, the swath of people we were losing are from, you know, 1 to 3 years of experience, a lot of our beginners, and a lot of them, we had a really high turnover in elementary last year. So we need to be mindful of that as well. So if our starting pay isn't even keeping up, you know, and then across the board we're falling behind, we just need to be mindful and, you know, respectful of the work that's being done across, you know, for all teachers.
I guess, Susan, do you have anything else to add after that? I kind of want to see where your opinion is on that.
Yeah, so based on that feedback, and I know that has been previously shared, I support as presented by the administration.
Let's take a vote.
All right, so I have a motion by Ms. Unger, a second by Mr. Kurth. Diana, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Ms. Schultz,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
Motion passes. That brings us to our last item, which is going to be teed up by Ms. Manley.
Yes. I move to proceed with the commercial dishwasher bids as presented in closed session utilizing Fund 50 for the project.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Manley, a second by Mr. Kurth. Do we want to expand on that at all? Or any
Yeah,
discussion?
I'd be happy to provide an update. We typically would not have brought something forward like this to the board this quickly. But given the fact that we have an opportunity as a result of the school closures, we asked to move this process forward. And essentially, we're looking to replace all of the commercial dishwashers at all of our schools. There are 6 different schools. The total amount for the work that needs to be done is about $152,000. The recommended project cost comes in at about $145,000, and we set up a 5% contingency, which is different than our typical 10% contingency. Actually, I take that back. I do want to clarify that these are for 3 schools. not all 6 schools. And the contingency is at 5% because we feel very comfortable with the bid specs that we received from the vendors. So the total budget is coming in at $152,370. Should we, for some unforeseen reason, have an opportunity to get these installed in a timely manner where our students and our staff are not in the building, we will take advantage of that. Otherwise, we'll certainly have to wait until the summer, which is when we originally anticipated doing this work. So we, as mentioned by a couple of board members, we're not breaking, cement up and doing things that we're going to expect as a change should we have to be asked to come back to school as we had known it up until about 2.5 weeks ago. And so given this, and I do want to clarify that all the dollars for these washers in this proposal are coming out of Fund 50, which is outside of our general fund. It is the food service fund. And dollars for Fund 50 are not provided by taxpayers. Sure, they are indirectly, as students and their parents are paying for meals. We also do get money from the feds as well. So again, someone could, I guess, interpret that. But as far as local dollars is not the case here. And so as a result of that, it comes highly recommended from the Director of Food Nutrition, Cindy Jansen. Also comes from Andy Stefanson, our Director of Building and Grounds, and that of our CFO, Patrick Miller, who, again, we're recommending, given the opportunity that we have, that we move forward with this project as has been presented.
All right, any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll reiterate. We really need to get this information so that we can digest it and then get a second read, similar to what we do for all of our policies. So I request that we don't get information and have to vote on it the same day, so that we get the opportunity to think about it, digest it, ask questions, get responses back in the future.
I have a motion by Ms. Manley, a second by Mr. Kurth. Diana, can you call the roll?
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Schulz,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
That brings us to future meetings and dates. Our next board meeting will be held on April 27th. I have it as a virtual meeting with a potential finance committee to precede it at 5:30. Spring break will be held from April 10th through the 17th. The board meeting after the 27th will be May 11th, and we are hoping to have that at Poplar Creek in the gym. And then I think the meeting after that will be Tuesday, May 26th at West. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Mitch.
A motion by Mr. Kurth, a second by Mr. Helmer to adjourn. Diana, call the roll.
Mr. Kurth,
Yes.
Mr. Helmer,
Yes.
Ms. Crosby,
Yes.
Ms. Manley,
Yes.
Ms. Schulz,
Yes.
Ms. Unger,
Yes.
and Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
Motion passes. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.